Hi everyone, it's Carlene again with the Collaboratory. I'm an account manager and scientific recruiter with Recruitomics, also working with the Collaboratory. And we're here again for another interview regarding careers in biotech. And I am so pleased to have Ren-Jay with us. Ren-Jay earned his PhD in kinesiology and then also did a postdoc for 3 years studying translational research. And he's transitioned directly from academia into being a medical science liaison. I'll let him introduce himself, and he has also done a few other interviews previously that are really great resources. I'll cite, some of the information he covered there, and we'll drop some links so that y'all can check them out. But I'll let Ren-Jay go ahead and introduce himself.
Thank you, Carlene. It's great to be here. I really appreciate the invitation to come on here and share a little bit about my career path, if you will. And for those of you who don't know, Carlene and I actually overlapped at UAB when she was a graduate student and I was a postdoc. So that's the connection here. But as Carlene said, I did my PhD at Indiana University in the Human Performance Lab down there, followed by a postdoc in the Cystic Fibrosis Research Center at UAB, focusing on translational medicine. And from there, hopped over to Mallinckrodt Pharmaceuticals for my first role as the medical science liaison in the biopharmaceutical industry, supporting the INOMAX and critical care portfolio of Mallinckrodt over there. From there, I spent another couple years at Coherus Biosciences, supporting the entire portfolio at that company, which encompassed a number of different therapeutic areas, including oncology, ophthalmology, and biosimilars. And more recently have made the transition to a small biotech company based out of Stamford, Connecticut called SpringWorks Therapeutics, supporting their rare oncology disease portfolio. The product I support at the moment is called nirogacestat, which is a small molecule gamma secretase inhibitor being developed for a rare type of soft tissue tumor called the desmoid tumor. So that's a little bit about my professional background, and happy to elaborate more if you have any questions, Carlene.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for that overview. And it's, right from the start, it's really interesting how you're able to, work with different kinds of subject matters and working with different products and, really expanding on your previous background, especially studying cystic fibrosis to now working with oncology. I think it's a really great opportunity to, broaden your reach and be able to talk to people from really interesting backgrounds. And so just to start, I just wanted to mention with your really interesting career, those previous interviews, you do a really great job talking about the reality of looking for MSL jobs and talking about how, almost very little people actually find a job just from interviewing and or just applying on a website, and how you really took advantage of using LinkedIn and doing really great informational interviews. You also talk about different career paths that line up pretty well with transitioning to being an MSL. But to back up a little bit, we were also interested in what you wanted to be when you were 7 years old. So way before you developed any of these interests and were deciding to earn your PhD and things like that.
That's a great question, and it's funny you asked that timing wise, because at the time, the thing I wanted to do most at 7 years old was be a fighter pilot, and that was because of seeing the first Top Gun movie that Tom Cruise starred in, and with the sequel coming out last year, it's pretty funny thinking back about that time. The other funny story I'll share, and my mom tells this story all the time, is when I was 5 years old, not 7, I wanted to be a garbage man because then I'd only have to work 1 day a week.
Pretty incredible that you've been able to make that jump. And yeah, and I always say, when we talk to students about graduate research and being involved in the biomedical field overall, I think what's really incredible about the opportunity to do that work is like, the garbage man and everyone in our community like all contribute to the resources that we have in order to do that great work. So thank you for sharing that story. It's great to see that evolution. But yeah, and so you've worked at 3 different companies so far since you've left academia. Can you talk a little bit more about, what's been different and what's been consistent in those different positions? I know you mentioned working with different kinds of products, but can you talk a little bit more about, what's been different in terms of the culture or the day-to-day and things like that?
Absolutely. So I guess I'll start with what's maybe been more consistent across the roles, and I think, when you start looking at medical science liaison roles online and you start reading about them, you read all about this key opinion leader, or KOL, uh, portion of it. And I would say that, the KOL relationships, being able to identify, develop, and maintain those relationships is certainly a core function that medical science liaisons have across the board, regardless of your company. Separate from that, I think also, of course, there is an expectation that you are the therapeutic area expert, both in the disease state and also specific to your product. So that is another, area that's definitely consistent across all the companies that I've been at. Um, and then thirdly, being able to respond quickly and also accurately to unsolicited medical information requests, whether those are off-label questions or other requests for information. That's another core function that I think almost every MSL role is going to encompass. Um, Now, where things differ, I think, is the scope of what you do outside of some of those core functions. I've been fortunate that I've had really great collaborative environments at all three of the companies that I've been in. And what I mean by that is I've had the opportunity to interact with folks from all sorts of different other functions within the company, whether that's medical information, um, scientific communications, or health economics and outcomes research, business development, pharmacovigilance, and of course, all of our commercial colleagues on the sales and marketing side as well. So, the type and scope of those interactions is going to vary depending on where your product is in the life cycle, as well as the company size, directive, and really how they establish those cross-functional relationships. But by and large, I think that's where you see probably the most difference, or at least in my limited experience across companies, and also where I think there's potentially the most opportunity depending on what you want to do with your career.
It's really interesting too, considering, differences in, the size of the company. How would you say, working, I know you've just recently joined your current organization, but can you comment a little bit too on, the ways that the size of the company might also influence your experience as an MSL?
Absolutely. So the three companies that I've been with, Mallinckrodt, Coherus, and Springworks, are on the smaller side. So traditionally you might think of the very large companies like the GSK, Johnson Johnson, Merck, those types of companies that really are large global companies. Typically employing tens of thousands of people globally. Those are kind of your traditional big pharmas. Mallinckrodt, my first role is more what we consider a mid-sized company. When I joined the company, it was about 2,200 people total. And then my most recent two companies, Coherus and Springworks, are definitely your traditional small biotech companies in that Coherus, when I joined, was about 350 people, and Springworks is about 300 at the moment. So across those different company sizes, I think you're going to see slight differences in how they operate. Now, never having worked in big pharma, I can't tell you firsthand what that experience is like. But at least in my experience at the small to mid-sized companies, there's probably a lot more opportunity for those cross-functional collaborations and to really take on some of those projects that help you stretch and grow your skills. And to use a phrase that's commonly used in the industry is to wear different hats, right? You get an opportunity perhaps to lead a project that you may not otherwise be able to do. And part of that is a byproduct of the company size. When you're small, you're typically leaner, and you're going to have to rely on more of the expertise and ability of the people that you do have to execute and really stretch themselves to accomplish those cross-functional goals.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for that insight. And I can also imagine that working with a smaller organization that you're more aware of, the overall portfolio and, other products or projects that other people are working on. I feel like that would make it, kind of a more interesting environment to work in as well. And so,
Definitely.
stepping back in terms of the process of finding a position, I feel like interviewing for an MSL position would be really unique, especially compared to, if you're considering a traditional scientific role, or, something that's on the further end in terms of, science communication, like project management and something like that. Were there any surprising or unique questions that you encountered during the interview process, during, pursuing any of those three MSL roles?
Yeah, that's a great question. And just to back up a little bit, you're certainly right that the MSL interview process is probably more unique than any other interview process, at least that I've been through, in that it generally has multiple steps. You generally may have an initial screen with HR, followed by an initial screen with the hiring manager. And then typically you'll meet several other members of the medical affairs and potentially even the commercial team, sometimes three, four, maybe even five people, before moving on to what we would consider kind of the final round or panel interview, which historically has taken place in person at the company headquarters, and typically encompasses a seminar or presentation where you deliver a presentation that on a topic of the company's choosing. So that's kind of what the interview process looks like. And as far as your question about some of the unique questions that I've um, been asked, a lot of what I've been asked has been pretty much aligned with what your typical interview questions have been. Why do you want this job? What makes your skill set or your experience unique? What experience do you have with this therapeutic area, and so on. But I think some of the more unique questions I've been asked is, number one, tell me about a time that you know something negative happened in the workplace, and how did you resolve that issue? I think that's a very insightful question to really probe on how people react to some of those less than positive situations in the workplace and how they navigate those. And another question I've been asked is, "What's your favorite song?" And the reason I bring that up is because not only are the interviewers typically looking for that communication skill and that expertise technically, which most candidates will have, but they're also looking for people who can be themselves, who can be people, and be their genuine selves, and that's really important, I think, in this type of role, because you are external facing as well as internal facing, and so you have to be able to establish those relationships both with your internal colleagues, but also relate to those key opinion leaders, healthcare providers, and other people externally that you might meet. So I think a lot of times, the medical affairs leadership during the interview process are looking for people who can be relatable, who can be sociable, um, and not just someone who can come in and talk about the science, but really go beyond that and build and develop and maintain that relationship.
Yeah, definitely. I can imagine this is one of those roles where, every day is different. The type of people that you work with on a regular basis are also completely different and have different levels of understanding or expertise in the products or medical field that you're talking about. So being able to really, think quickly on your feet and also be personable and relatable, I feel like are, really interesting dynamics to have to juggle. And in terms of, say you're someone who's coming straight out of school or someone who's looking to transition from medical writing or something like that, and you're looking at a bunch of different MSL roles and maybe you've even done a few interviews, are there any red flags that may be specific to MSL roles?
Specific to MSL roles, I'm not sure that I have any great insights specific to the MSL role, but I will say, a lot of people, myself included, when you're interviewing, it's really easy to fall into that trap of like, hey, I really want this job. It just seems like such a great opportunity. And it's easy to lose sight of the fact that you are interviewing the company and the people there as much as they are interviewing you. So I think that's the number one tip that I would give, is make sure that you are asking those difficult and probing questions about things like what the company culture is like, what are the key performance indicators, where does the management see the company going in the next 3, 6, 9 months, and so on. What happens if X milestone isn't hit? What are the strategies to to move forward from there. I think it's really important to not only ask those questions, but then also gauge how the interviewer that you're asking responds to those questions. Because the last thing you want to do is take a job just because of a name or what you perceive as a prestigious opportunity. What if it's not really the right fit for you culturally, career-wise, and if it doesn't align with your career goals. So I think that's the number one tip that I would give. Related to that, I think if you don't feel like the company is really getting a good picture of who you are as a candidate, or isn't really doing their due diligence and probing you, sometimes it may feel like you would just be a person that's filling the role and nothing beyond that. And some people are okay with that, but for me personally, I want to know that I was chosen because I was the right fit for the position, and that their goals aligned with mine. And when that happens, I think you have the opportunity to really have that synergistic relationship where you can contribute something meaningful to the company, but they can also contribute to your own career development as well. So that would be a red flag if you feel like they're just kind of glossing over some topics, not really probing you on some difficult questions and answers, and really kind of letting you just skate by in that interview process. It may make it seem like it's a little bit easier, but at the end of the day, um, I think it makes it harder for both parties to really understand the other, and go in with eyes wide open. So you may end up signing up for something that one or both of you don't fully understand.
Yeah, for sure, 100%. And like you mentioned, that's really great advice, no matter what type of role that you're considering. And I think, especially for this type of role, evaluating how people on the other team are able to communicate such an essential skill set for this position. Being able to identify people who have a strong skill set that can mentor you further
Hmm.
in developing that type of, awareness and ability to work with people. Well, great.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for agreeing to talk with us today. I really enjoy your insight. And like I mentioned, the other videos that you have out there are super helpful. They're a bit longer, so you get to dig in a little bit more in terms of your background and your career path. And I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Carlene.
Thanks. Bye.